We'll kind of give everybody a chance to kind of get online here as we go. For those of you watching, we will also be live streaming this on our YouTube page, so you can go and watch this on YouTube after. We'll kind of give everybody a chance to kind of get online here as we go. For those of you watching, we will all. Okay, there we go. All right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our digital live stream Hoosier Catholic Week Men's Night. This is the first time we've been blessed to have a Hoosier Catholic alumnus as part of our Hoosier Catholic Week lineup. And so it is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Dave Spahn. Dave, introduce yourself to our men.
Cool. Well, thank you, Father Patrick, for having us. Thanks, everybody, for coming here. Like Father Patrick said, my name is Dave Spahn. I graduated from Indiana in 2014. I'm originally from Chicago. Came to Indiana, loved my time there. I met Father Patrick before you became a priest, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was pre-priesthood. And when you were working at the Newman Center, and we met, I think it was my junior year. And then we, from there, struck up a few conversations, developed a friendship. I remember when we started our first Bible study. And then it's been awesome to kind of see your progression to come back to the Newman Center as well. From Indiana, I graduated and moved out to LA to take a job with a sports agency in LA called Creative Artists Agency, CAA for short. Where I started off working for the basketball department there. I became a certified NBA player agent in about 4 years ago now. And so I right now represent NBA players in their contracts with NBA teams on the court. We help, solidify marketing deals for our clients and just kind of handle a lot of the on and off the court business relationships for our clients. Our company works with, actors, entertainers, musicians, writers, athletes, but I work specifically in basketball. I've been working at the same company now since graduation. So almost 7 years ago, which is crazy to think that was 7 years ago since I was out of Bloomington. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here. So thanks everyone for allowing me to hang out with you guys for the night.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Dave. Obviously we're having this unique year because of COVID. And so I was trying to think, how can we be a little creative this year? How can we do something a little different? And also, especially for our guys here at St. Paul's, who are students, it's kind of like, okay, we can bring in a priest, we can bring in someone who's a professional church minister or something like that. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring in Dave is I've known him for so long, but just that witness of, okay, what is it like to chase your dreams professionally and to still strive to live your faith and to have that be a part of your life, right? No one's perfect in that regard, and we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, but just that example for you guys, especially who, it's wonderful that we have people who go on to be priests, who go on to be focused missionaries, who go on to be professional ministers in the church, but most of you are not going to be in that really in that reality for your life. But no matter where you end up, you're called to be a disciple. You're called to bring the Lord and to be faithful in that. And so I'm really excited about tonight and to kind of get us going. So Dave, you kind of told us a little bit about yourself, but tell us about kind of your experience as growing up Catholic, your family, all of those things, that kind of got you through high school and whatnot.
Sure. So I was, again, born and raised in Chicago my whole life, lived here up until I went to school. Once I left Indiana, I moved out to LA, but up until that point, the only place I'd ever lived was Chicago. Grew up in a Catholic family. Both my parents grew up Catholic, came from two Catholic families. My whole family's Catholic. All of my brothers and sisters are still practicing Catholic. My parents are still practicing Catholics. So I grew up in, what unfortunately is a rarity, I would say, in a lot of the world today, with a family that has a very grounded experience in Catholicism. I mean, I remember when I was a little kid whining and complaining about having to go to church before, like they had, little kids playing on Game Boys and iPads now, like they do today, to have the little kids shut up in church and not cry the whole time. I was in there crying, screaming, had to go in the cry room with my parents. So I've been going to church ever since I can remember. And I think that luckily for me, like my Catholic upbringing and my family and the background that I had in my faith is really kind of what propelled me through the more trying years, or kind of like the years of where you're becoming an adult and your faith gets tested, right? I think that in your faith life, in your personal life, in your work life, and in anything, I work in sports, so we use the sports analogy all the time. When you get put to test, right? Like for sports, the games are a test. So when you get into a game, your practice is what you fall back on, right? Your level of training is what you end up falling back on when things get tough. When you're in a moment and you can't think and you just have to react and act, you act to the level of your training. And so I think that for the same thing goes for your faith. You eventually end up falling to the level of your training and the level of your prayer life and the way that you've been kind of attacking your faith. And so for me, I was really lucky to have that support system because, all you guys are students at Indiana. So, I loved Indiana. It was an unbelievable place. And I would have gone there 100 times out of 100 if you gave me the choice 100 times. Like I truly wouldn't have changed a thing. But there's a lot of things about college, especially in a big public college university like Indiana, that are going to really drag you away from your faith. And so for me, just being lucky enough to have so much support in the faith has really kind of helped get me through the tougher times in the formation years. And kind of, I remember when I was a freshman and I was living in the dorms, I would be going to church on Sunday afternoons, Sunday evenings, and I would ask people if they wanted to go to church, and people would just like laugh at me, right? Or people would be like, "Oh, here comes Dave asking us to go to church again." Like guys would literally start laughing at me until I found one of my friends who wanted to go with me, and so we went every week for the whole time we were at school together. And ironically enough, that friend ended up being, Father Patrick knows who it is, but that my friend was Victor Oladipo. And so, Victor and I developed a really good friendship outside of our faith, obviously, but our faith was kind of one of the main reasons that brought us together, is that we were both raised Catholic and grew up Catholic. So luckily for me, I met somebody else who kind of felt the same way about things. And I know that a lot of times when I still struggle with it to this day, being out in California, living where I do, living the lifestyle that I do. I'm not around a whole lot of people who view faith and view the world the same way that we as Catholics do. So again, for me, luckily my family was the thing that kind of took that void and took that burden off my shoulder, just because I knew I had that support system to always go back to whenever things got tough. And that's different for everybody. I mean, there's not everybody grows up Catholic. There's a lot of people who don't have that same family support system. And so I think, whatever that may be, whether it's, for some people it's finding their quiet place or finding their time to go pray. For some people it's, being able to carve out a certain time in their day to go on a run and clear their head, or whatever it may be. For everyone, I think it's different. But I encourage everyone to figure out the things in their life or the moments in their life when they were closest in their faith, or felt like they were closest to God, felt like they had the strongest relationship with Christ, and think about kind of what led you to that point and what were the surrounding parts of your life at that point that really pushed you in that direction, and to really continue to go back and surround yourself in that moment, because I think that's the easiest way to kind of get out of a rut, especially at a place like Indiana.
Yeah. Dave, you mentioned kind of just that struggle of being Catholic, of asking, what kind of helped you continue through that adversity, right? Because it's so easy in the face of that to shy away, to not ask anybody. But what were kind of just like, were there friends or family members who were encouraging you, or was it just something like, hey, I really need to go find a brother in arms, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there? Kind of how was that how did that play into your time at IU?
So it's funny because, I mean, again, today I'm 29. I've been gone from Indiana for a long time. It's something I still struggle with every single day to this day. And it's probably something that everyone will struggle with, or a lot of people will struggle with as a main struggle for the rest of their life, really. Especially with just the way that the world is going. Like it's tough. I grew up Catholic family, went to Catholic school my whole life. I didn't even really understand the fact that there was an option to not be Catholic until I got to Indiana, because everyone I knew my whole life was Catholic. I went to Catholic school my whole life. I like I said, my whole family's Catholic. All my friends were Catholic, at least I thought. And even if they weren't Catholic growing up, I just assumed that they were. That, I didn't know any different. I didn't know any better. Everyone I was around growing up was Catholic, and if they weren't Catholic, I just assumed they were Catholic, to be honest. And then I got to Indiana, and I realized, like, wow, I was living definitely in a bubble in terms of like the way I perceived the world as a faith place. And then when I got to LA, it changed even more. I remember, I was in LA one time at a party on a Saturday night, and at one point I just looked around. I'm like, I gotta go. I'm tired. And so all my friends are, hey, where you going, man? It's not that late yet. Why are you leaving? And I'm like, oh man, I got a busy day tomorrow. I got this I got to do. I got a lot of work I have to do. I got to go to church. And they looked at me, they're like, you got to go to what? And I'm like, I got to go to church. And they were like, people do that? Like, people actually, I thought that was just in the movies. And I looked at them like I thought they were joking, and they looked at me like they thought I was joking. And neither of us could even comprehend the fact that the other one wasn't joking. I was like, you're kidding me, right? And they were looking at me like I was crazy. So that moment, I remember I went home, I called an Uber, I went home, and I was like, the whole night, I just remember thinking in my head, like, wow, that's so crazy that there really are people who are like mystified that I'm going to church. Like they could not even believe that people go to mass. And so for me, like I think in different parts of my life, I've fallen back on different things. When I kind of find myself in a place where I'm not, where I realize I'm not as close to God as I want to be, or when I'm not surrounded with a lot of people who are also like working on their faith formation or trying to talk about Christ, the things that I really go to are, I really like to listen to podcasts. That's something that I've really liked for a long time. I'm not a huge reader. I wish I was. Whenever someone says that a book or a movie is good, I'm going to watch the movie. Don't waste your time on asking me about the book. It's just not my thing. I'll try to read sometimes if I have to, but I like to listen. I like to watch. And so for me, I find myself really kind of trying to gravitate towards Catholic podcasts or faith formation podcasts. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Father Mike Schmitz, but he's probably the guy that I go to the most. He's my favorite, other than Father Patrick's Sunday homilies, of course. But no, I really like Father Mike Schmitz. I think
you're the one guy listening to my podcast.
Father Mike Schmitz, actually, he's started something this year. It's called the Bible in a Year podcast, where you're going to read all of the, not the whole entire Bible in a year, but you're going to read the genealogy of Jesus up until the Gospels through to Revelations. And so it's quick. It's 20 minutes a day. He reads the Bible for the first probably 15 minutes, then gives his commentary for the last 5. Little stuff like that. I try to find other podcasts and things to listen to just kind of remind me that although we all may be surrounded in places where there aren't a lot of Catholic people there, or people may not share the same worldviews that we do, there are people in the world who do. The Catholic community really is a big community. It's just spread out across the world. And I think that a lot of people are hiding in plain sight in your life who probably even feel the same way that you do, but don't have anyone to talk to about it either. And so I've kind of just found myself really being a lot more open to talk about God. I hang a cross in my office at work. On Ash Wednesday, I come in walking in proudly with huge ashes on my forehead, and everyone looks at me like I didn't take a shower. But I try to, just do little things to hopefully spark a conversation. I remember I went to, about 2 years ago, I was at our company retreat down in like Southern California, almost in San Diego. and the retreat took place on Ash Wednesday. And I remember I left part of retreat to go get my ashes, and I came back, and I was the only person there out of probably, over 1,000 people with ashes on my head. I had people looking at me like I was an alien. People were laughing at me. I mean, but there were a couple people who came up to me and were like, "Oh man, I'm Catholic too. I forgot today was Ash Wednesday. Thank you for the reminder. Like, I'm going to go say some prayers in my room." Or stuff like, "Oh, I didn't know you were Catholic. We should go to church sometime." Or, "Hey, where do you go to mass? Where's there a mass around here? I didn't know that there was a church around here. Like, I've been looking for a church." And so I think, as much as the weird looks that I got, I also had a lot of people come to me and say like, "Hey, I've been looking for somebody to talk to about this stuff." And so I thought that was really cool. I try not to, force stuff down their throat. If you don't want to talk about Christ, there's a million other things we could talk about. I mean, that's fine with me, but there are definitely people out there who are also searching and looking for people to talk to. And so I felt like in that moment, that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I'm like, you know what, I may think that I'm alone, but I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who feel the same way as me. You just got to find them. And, again, my escape in trying to turn closer to Christ is through Catholic podcasts. And I think there's a million different ways you can do it, but I've always kind of gravitated towards podcasts. So I've found a lot of success in that. I've found that kind of helps me learn and grounds me again. And I've been really pleased with the amount of good reception, I would say, that I've gotten from small situations like that Ash Wednesday out in California.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, since I've known you 8-9 years now, and like I've always known, and you've always been like upfront that you want to be in basketball. That's like your passion. We talk a lot about, as Catholics, we talk a lot about discernment. How do I know that this is God's will for me? And oftentimes it has to do with, do I get married? Do I become a priest? Do I, how, can you kind of walk us through and like, what was your process in trying in figuring out what you wanted to do and kind of and working toward that? Because I think one of the things we have to realize is discernment is not just about like, do I marry this girl or do I become a priest or something like that? But it's really about, living and following the passions and the joys that God has given you as well. Because so kind of, talk about your love of basketball and how you kind of knew that was going to be your passion, your pursuit in life.
So it's an interesting question because working in the field that I do, there's a lot of people who ask me this question because it's not something that's comes across very often, right? I think that like people watch the movie Jerry Maguire, or a lot of people grow up as sports fans. They like the show Entourage, whatever it may be, and people always ask me, like, how did you get into that job? That's something I really want to do. Or I love sports. How can I work in sports? For me, when I was like in 8th grade, I remember my dad was like, you either have to, if you're not playing sports on this day, you have to get a job. So in the summer, if I didn't have football practice, I would work at his office. And I remember I hated every second of it. I was filing papers, shredding papers. I was miserable. I would go there for 3 hours. It felt like I was there for 3 weeks. I wanted to pull my hair out. And I just remember thinking to myself in that moment, like, man, there's no way I could ever work a job where I don't love what I do, just because me personally, I don't think I'd be very good at that. There are a lot of people who work jobs that aren't, the most enthralling jobs to the public eye, but they make a good living. They enjoy their job enough and they are setting their family up well, and they're being good, like, disciples of Christ, which that's fine. And for some people, for most people, to be honest, that is the path that they are called to do. I just felt from a very early age that I was called to do something a little bit different. I knew that sports, specifically basketball, was my passion. I started working in this field when I was in high school, actually. So I became like a high school basketball scout when I was a high school student. And I started, it's kind of a long story, but I started scouting games, meeting college coaches, running a scouting service. And I just became very kind of entrenched in the basketball world. And I knew the whole time I was doing it, I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is hard work and this is a tough job and I'm not getting paid much money right now, but I really enjoy this. And I see a future somewhere down the line for me. And so I think that, like, a lot of the mistakes that young people make when they're coming through the world is like, for me, I was a scout. Then I started being a basketball writer. I tried coaching for a little bit. I did an internship with a financial company to see if I wanted to work in potentially sports finance. I tried a lot of different things that I thought I could potentially like. And then I started working for an agency as an intern, and I loved it. And I knew from there, that was what I was called to do. But I think that if you don't try a lot of different things, what happens is on your bad days, you're going to think to yourself, like, is this really it for me? Is this really what I want to do? And unless you have other experience in doing other things, it's hard to really say, because to be honest, my whole life, I thought I wanted to be a coach. I thought that coaching was my profession. I really wanted to like make an impact on people's lives as a coach. I really liked like the X's and O's coaching style of basketball. And then I tried it and didn't really like it as much as I thought. But if I never would have tried that and I would have just gone straight into, let's say, being an agent, on my bad days as an agent, I would have, a day where I was just miserable, didn't like work, I'd probably be thinking to myself every day, like, hey, is this really what I was called to do? Is this really what I should be doing? Maybe I would like being a coach. Maybe I'd like being a writer, whatever. And now I can look back on it and say, you know what? I tried that stuff. I didn't like that. Like, this is just a bad day. And so for me, I try not to judge a job based on your bad days or your good days, because every job is going to have good and bad days. What do you think of your job on a very average day? On an average day, the most average day, are you happy? Are you filled with joy? Is this a job that's fulfilling to you? And if not, then you should probably think about a career change. But if it is on an average, if you're just having a couple bad days, that's common in anything, right? I have bad days. I mean, LeBron has bad days. Like, everybody has bad days, And so I think that I was fortunate enough to figure out my passion at an early age and turn that into a career. Not everyone has that luxury. Not everyone figures out early what they want to do. There are people in their 50s and 60s who still are changing jobs and don't love their job. So what I would say is, like, don't get discouraged when you see young people succeeding in the world, because everyone has a different path and everyone has a different timeline for how long it's going to take for success. So for me, I was lucky enough to figure that out early, but there are a lot of people who don't figure that out for really late in their life, and that's okay. That's fine. So I try to tell people, don't get discouraged when you see young people succeed. If anything, that should just help you spur the thought of, like, hey, you know what? Let me figure out what could potentially be this road for me and try it.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I've admired about you, like your willingness to try things, because kind of a little backstory. When I was a student brother at St. Paul's, so 8 years ago, and Dave was a student, there was really not a whole lot going on at Hoosier Catholic, especially compared to what we have right now. And so I got to know Dave a little bit just in talking with him before and after Mass, and just catching up here and there. And Dave, and I can't remember your friend's name who was with us. What was your friend's, who was with our Bible study there? Steve, yeah.
Steve, yep.
So they came up and said, hey, like, can we do a Bible study? Right? They just took that risk, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try something. And the three of us met on Monday nights for basically the whole semester. And I don't know but just taking that little risk and saying, hey, I'd like to take that next step, and what does that look like? And taking that time to do it and trying to figure those things. It's so important in our growth and figuring out, like, what do I need to do to take my faith, to take my professional life to that next step, and being willing to try it and be like, that's maybe not for me, but at least giving it that effort. Because I think you're right. And, I think we can get so caught up in thinking, like, I have to know exactly what I want to do when I'm 22 years old and graduating from Indiana University. And some people have that, but very few people get to that point where very few people are 8 years old and realize, I'm going to be a medical doctor, right? We have to try things. We have to test things out. We have to do those little things that, where we have to take those risks and fail, and be okay with failing, so that we can then be more confident in the next step. So, Dave, like, put yourself, if you were to give 22-year-old you advice, like, you've been doing that throughout, but like, let's talk to our students here, like, in terms of, I guess, before we get into that, like, how do you keep your head straight and level in the world, and in the world where you live, right? Where there's a lot, I remember, when I was here as a student brother, right after the season ended, talking with Victor in after mass in the gathering space, and just being like, Victor, like he was what, like the fourth pick that year, like he was the runner up for the Naismith Award, like he was going places and he was going to be very successful and very rich very fast. I remember talking with him after mass and just being like, Victor, like I can't even imagine the temptations that you, like I think my life is like so difficult and so full of temptation, but like with people constantly asking you and the players you represent for things, and to, how do you kind of keep that balance so that you don't get caught, you know looking at the glitter, but really kind of get down to the substance of things, and how do you help your clients and everyone else just kind of to do that as well? Because I think that's what probably helps you professionally, is having that even keel and not getting too caught up in all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. And to be honest, I don't even necessarily think that there's like a right answer to that question, because
Oh,
it's
sure.
a constant struggle. It's something that I struggle with every day. It's something that every one of my clients struggles with every day. I think it's something that pretty much everyone with, um, any type of notoriety in their life will receive an increased amount of temptation, right? And I mean, shoot, the amount of temptation that I get is a lot, but the amount that my clients get is, I mean, it's out of control. And I mean, some of the stories that I could tell you, you guys wouldn't even believe. And so, for me personally, I think that, at least in terms of, I mean, I could break this up into like how I can hopefully, choose to work on my temptation, and then how I can help my clients. So for me personally, again, it's honestly, it's a daily struggle, for sure. And a lot of times I fail a lot. And I think that like what I've really tried to, um, tell myself is like, a lot of times I'm gonna fail, and I have to be okay with the fact that like if I do fail, I can't just start over and push the restart button on my entire life, and get so down on myself that I'm gonna spiral into the next one. Right? It's just you have to have a short memory. Um, I remember, a coach told me this one time, and I really liked the quote. He said, "Write your successes in stone and your failures in the sand." And I try to remember that a lot, because it's like, I think that for me personally, I'm very hard on myself, and I'm one of my own toughest critics. I'm very, work takes up so much of my life, and I'm very driven, and I'm my own worst enemy in a lot of situations, because I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so when I fail, or when I fail the temptation, when I fail in my work life, when I fail in my whatever it may be, I usually don't need a whole lot of people yelling at me, because I'm usually the one who's the hardest on myself. Now, a lot of people are different. There are some people who aren't like that, but I can only speak to how I feel. So for me, I'm my hardest critic. And I think that again, just reminding myself that, we all are going to fail, but if our life is centered around Christ, if we always have Christ to go back to, right? And if we always have, if even amidst all the chaos, amidst all the temptation, like if you're not centered on Christ, you are going to fail. And even if you are centered on Christ, you will fail. But if you're not, then you're really going to fail. And what happens is eventually you're going to wake up, and your moral compass kind of slowly moves overnight sometimes, if you allow the little things to distract you. And eventually you're going to wake up, and you're going to be doing something that you never dreamed you would be doing. And so I think for me, I try to really, stay consistent with my prayer life and with my relationship with Christ, because consistency is the only real way to see results in anything. Whether it's working out, whether it's studying, whether it's praying, no matter what it is, you could have a couple of good days, and that's fine, but that doesn't really do much. Like if you're on a diet and you have a good week, and then you fall, and then you stop working on it for a month, that doesn't really matter. Or if it's every other day or every third day, like consistency is what makes you great in anything. And so what I've tried to do is just really, create a plan for myself, and know that like, hey, if you fail, it's okay. Start again the next day, start again the next hour, whatever it may be. and not getting discouraged when you see failure, because failure is a part of it. Like I've tried to come to know that like I expect to fail sometimes, but I can't let that get me down or take me away from the next one. So that's kind of how I deal with things. And then as far as like helping my clients, I think that, in my profession, again, I deal with a lot of like, I mean, let's just call it what it is. I deal with a lot of celebrities. I deal with a lot of people who have a lot of fame and have experienced a lot of fame and money at a young age. I think that if you don't have genuine intentions, that will become very apparent at some point. And the job that I do is a job where if you don't like what you do, you're not gonna. The allure of working with a celebrity wears off very fast. And it wears off very fast, even if they're good guys. If they're bad guys, it wears off really, really fast. But you have to really enjoy the work, and you have to enjoy the job and the daily work of what you're doing every day in order to succeed. Because, I mean, again, there's a lot of people who will ask me, hey, I want to do what you do. How can I get involved in your space or whatever? I love sports. I want to work with athletes, celebrities, whatever. They do it for a day and they're like, whoa, this is not what I thought I was going to do, right? This is not what I signed up for. So whatever it is, especially for me, like I think that your intentions, and if you go into something with a pure heart, if you go into your work, your friendships, whatever it may be, with pure intentions, with a pure heart, and you really do strive to help other people, you will eventually see the results that you want to see. I was listening to a homily yesterday where they were talking about the message that it's so simple, but I think a lot of people forget it. Like we live in a culture right now where everyone wants, right? They want something quickly. It's instantaneous gratification. It's the time period in the world of Instagram, TikTok, 10-second videos. They want to get everything quickly, but for me, I try to just always like remind myself like it is in giving that we receive, and we're not here to get in life. We're here to give of ourselves because that's what God calls us to do, and that's what God did for us. And I think that like it's very easy for me working in the field that I do, working with the people that I do, to get wrapped up in what I want, because look, I don't sit here and make crazy amounts of money. As you rise up in the field that I work in, there are some people who make a lot of money, a lot. But right now I'm still kind of at the entry level stages of what I know my future is. So I mean, I remember when I was an assistant, right? So my first year or two at my company, I was making like $12 an hour. I was making like what the janitor makes. And I was working this job everyone thought was so cool because I was talking to basketball players and whatever. And I remember
Uh-oh. Well, I think oh,
did I lose you guys?
you're back. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I think our internet went out. So like I was saying, so I remember getting invited to a dinner when I was young, first starting off in the business. And we went to Mastro's Steakhouse, which in LA, it's in Beverly Hills. It's one of like the nicest, most expensive restaurants in all of LA. And I remember going there and I'm eating this nice steak and drinking nice wine and hanging out. I mean, I don't even want to know how much the bill was to this dinner. And I remember going home that night and I opened up my cabinet and all I had in there was ramen noodles and all I had in my freezer was frozen pizza. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I weirdly get a taste of like the highest, most expensive, finest things in life because of the people I deal with. But at the time I'm making no money. And so I think in those moments, like it was so easy for me to be envious of the things that like all of my clients had and envious of my surroundings because I had like one hand into this world of like young, successful multimillionaires. And then I would come home to the reality of the fact that I was a nobody. And so I think that huge gap can sometimes cause like serious envy and serious jealousy. And what I just always tried to center myself back into is like this, none of this stuff matters at the end of the day. Like this doesn't define me. B, this isn't what makes me happy. I know a lot of miserable millionaires, and I know a lot of, super happy people who don't have more than a roof over their head and their family. And so like, I really just always tried to ground myself in the fact that, like, for me, um, my goal is to, again, I'm a very driven guy as far as professionally. So I really want to succeed, and I know that I will, but I'm not going to judge my success based on like the car that I drive or the money that I have or the house that I live in, because I think that that's just a small part of success, right? Like, I view the most successful people I know are the people who have helped the most people along the way, and who have brought the most people to Christ, and who are the people who've done the most with what they have. And so for me, I've really tried to continue to remind myself, like, hey, with every bit of success that you get, you now have more of an opportunity and more of a responsibility, real responsibility, to help people. So, I think that as long as you just continue to remember that, we're not here to get stuff for ourselves. Like, that's not why we're called to be here. Like, driving a nice car is great, and eating nice food and everything is great. But like, at the end of the day, our mission is to serve and to give back. And if you just don't lose sight of that, then I think that everything kind of just falls into place as it should on its own,
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. We've been going now for about a half hour, so I just wanted to open it up. There's a Q&A in there. If you guys want to ask questions of Dave, please feel free to do so. I'm not exactly sure how this works on a webinar because I've never done this before, so I'm trying not to make any sort of mistakes. But yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for our young guys to just ask whatever questions you might have of Dave, and we'll kind of keep the conversation going here if you don't have any questions. Dave, when you kind of went out into the here we go. All right. This is from one of our focus missionaries. When you're in your world, do you ever talk with players or about their faith? I would imagine that that's kind of something that has to come up naturally in a conversation. You probably don't lead with that. But like, what is it like talking with players in particular about their faith and the struggles that they have in their life, and trying to give meaning and purpose? Because a lot of these guys, even though they've had some success, maybe they're not playing as much as they like, or they're not getting as many points as they gotten, or as much of the ball. And so maybe there's, even though they have success, the good contract, the good team, whatever, they don't really, it's maybe the first time they've been struggling. How do you talk about like big picture things, meaning and purpose, faith with players in your world?
Sure. So I think the best way I can describe this, and I think this is something that applies to everyone in this chat here. The best way to talk to someone about your faith is to be able to develop a true, real relationship and friendship with someone first, because it's funny. I don't know if anyone here watches Game of Thrones, but I love that show. I think it's a great show. I know a lot of people, it's controversial, but I really enjoyed the show. And there was one moment in the show where one of the guys was talking about how he wanted to have a conversation with the queen, and how she wouldn't believe what he was saying. And the queen's advisor was basically telling him, like, have you spent any time with the queen yet? Like, does she know anything about you? Do you know anything about her? Are you friends? Because if not, how do you reasonably expect someone to trust you and to listen to you if they don't know you? They don't know who you are as a person. And I remember like watching that moment, and I'm like, man, that's so true about faith life too. It's so true about like talking to someone about your faith. Like, I'm not going to just walk up to some random guy on the street and be like, hey man, let's talk about Christ. He's going to look at me like, you're on drugs. What's wrong with you? I remember when I was little, I went to Vegas for a basketball tournament I was playing, and I saw those people standing on the street with, megaphones, holding up signs saying like, repent or go to hell. And I thought those people were kind of crazy. And look, good for them. They're at least preaching the right message. But like, for me, I've always felt like the way to get through to someone is for them to trust you, because in order to open up on a subject like faith, it's not an easy subject to talk about for a lot of people. Even some of my best friends don't like talking about faith, who I trust with my life. So you don't even have a chance at that subject if you don't know someone well, in my opinion. So for me, yes, I do talk to some of my clients about their faith life, but it's only when we've developed enough of a relationship to where we can have a conversation about something like that. Because again, it's a tricky subject. It's a hot button issue for some people. And I think for some people it can get like really emotional. And so I once I've developed a relationship where I know that we can talk about stuff like that, then we will have conversations. And usually it can be brought up by them. It can be brought up by me, either one. But, I think that the most important thing is anytime, I want to talk to my players about faith. Anytime anyone really wants to talk to anyone about faith, you should want to get to know the person first. The best way to have faith formation is not to stand up on a hill and start screaming at everyone to love Jesus. It's the most effective way to do it is small group. The most effective way to do it is to really get to know people. Father Patrick, you were actually the one who told me about this guy who you post on your Twitter a lot. The guy Marcel.
Marcel Lejeune,
who works down at Texas A&M. For those of you who have Twitter, he's a really good follow on Twitter. He speaks a lot about Catholic formation, and one of his tweets was talking about, I don't remember the exact percentage, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but the percentage was something like, I think it was like 80% of the time that Jesus spent on earth evangelizing was with 5 people or less, right? Was to small groups. Yes, he gave, large speeches like the Sermon on the Mount, and, he would preach to big groups and perform miracles for people. But the majority of his time was spent with intimate, real conversations, because that's when you can really have the conversations that change people's lives and change people's perception of the faith. So yeah, long-winded answer, but to answer your question, I do have those conversations. I don't force anything on anyone. I don't shove anything, down anyone's throat. If they're open to the conversation, great. If not, that's fine too. I have a lot of friends in my life that are of every walk of life and many different religions, many different beliefs. And that's fine. I'm not here to, I'm not here to force anyone into anything. What I try to do in my life is just be what I hope to be an example. And if someone can take away that from meeting me, that, they would like to know more about Christ, that's the goal, right? That's the hope, is that you don't need to have a ton of conversations, that the way that you live your life just, hopefully makes people want to learn more about Christ. And I think that's like the ultimate compliment, honestly, that you can get.
Yeah, it's that living with integrity.
Yeah,
that's the thing that's going to preach the most, right? Like, you can sit down and share your faith with anyone, anytime, but really what's going to attract people is that integrity. I know that one of my favorite all-time heroes in life, really, but also in sports, it was St. Louis Cardinals great Stan Musial. Now, Stan grew up son of Polish immigrants, very faithful Catholic man, but one of the greatest baseball players of his or any generation. And there's a story of him. It was like they're in New York or something. And back then, the baseball writers didn't write about the personal lives of the baseball players like they would now, because a lot of the baseball writers were out, carousing with the baseball players. But there was a writer sitting in the lobby of the St. Louis Cardinals hotel at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and kind of ticking off, okay, what player was out or all night long. And in walks at 7 o'clock in the morning or so, bright, crack of dawn, Stan Musial. And basically, this guy's just shocked because he's this guy with integrity. What is he doing walking in off the street at this hour? This isn't right. And so he asks him, he's like, Stan, what are you doing? Like, you're just coming in from last night? And he goes, oh no, St. Mary's around the corner had mass at 6 a.m. So I figured I'd go over there for a little bit. And I think just that witness of just that integrity of life, it wasn't a big deal to him. Stan was just living his faith, and that integrity, that honesty is what rubs off on people, what they can perceive. It's that credibility. If we really, and I think it's so important, especially to our young guys, is like, no matter where you end up in life, if you live your life and lead your professional life with faith and integrity, people are going to notice. Right? You may not have the most success in the world, but people are going to notice and they're going to think to themselves, that's the kind of success or that's the kind of life I want. Not, I think we can, as you were saying earlier, right? You can get so caught up in the envy and the things that other people have. But if you live your life with simplicity, with humility, with integrity, all of those things are icing on the cake. They're not the substance of what's important, because you have, as Jesus says, that pearl of great price, faith, that cannot overcome that. Just here's a question. You're a young guy. You're just listed in the Forbes magazine as like one of the 30 under 30. So congratulations on that. But and you've had success. Have there been moments where you've either had doubts or where you've really kind of hit a wall where you didn't know if you would persevere? And what kind of helped you get through that? And maybe who helped you get through that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely feel like I've hit a wall. There's been countless number of times where I've kind of woken up and looked around and thought to myself, like, man, I am not living the way that I want to live. I take a lot of pride in being Catholic. I think that my faith is what I would like to consider the most important thing to me. But as is, I think for most people, I don't always put my faith first. And I've screwed up on countless times and lived the way that I didn't want to live more often a lot of times than the way I do want to live. I think that, when there've been so many times really where I could think about it, but for me, I think, living in LA, again, I don't have very many friends who are Catholic in LA. Pretty much the majority of the people that I spend the most of my time with, I wouldn't even would consider themselves Christian. And so, sometimes when you look around and you're the only person in the room who feels the way that you feel, it's tough. It's tough to stand firm in what you believe. And I think that I've seen myself kind of shift and drift towards, certain sides and then kind of try to center myself back. But, for me, what I always try to do to at least center myself and come back to all the time, is, again, one, I have to know that I'm going to fail. I have to accept that. And I can't be too hard on myself about that. I have to accept the fact that I'm going to fail. And I have to, use that to help propel me forward. And I think that, a lot of times, at least in my life, I'll screw something up and then I'll almost just be like, it's whole thing's over. Like I just might as well just throw it all out. And I try to just continually tell myself that it's okay. You're gonna hit bumps in the road all the time. There's gonna be countless times, probably even more times than not, where you're gonna look yourself in the mirror and say, man, I didn't have a good day today. I didn't think I was a very good Christian today. I messed up on so many different occasions. But like right now I'm going through, I'm like I was referenced before, the Bible in a Year podcast with Father Mike Schmitz, and we're going through the genealogies of Jesus right now. And I'm a little bit behind. I'm not up to date, but right now I'm on like the very end of Genesis. And I don't know if any of you guys have read the book of Genesis. I know Father Patrick's probably read it a million times, but man, the amount of stuff that happens and turmoil that happens, and just like the word that Father Mike Schmitz uses is brokenness, right? The amount of brokenness that happens in the book of Genesis. I mean, just incestual relations, murder. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And these are all people who are related to Jesus's like genealogy. I mean, these are the people, this is the family in which Jesus came from. And so when I read stuff like that and I think to myself, like, man, I didn't do what I was supposed to do today, but like, that's why we're here. We live in a broken world. That's why like God sent his son to this world, because he knew it was broken. He knew that we all needed help, and he knew that we're going to fail every day. And I guess for me, it's just really working on like surrendering and just surrendering myself, and realizing like when I make a mistake, to not double down on that mistake and make another one, but it's just to kind of center myself back and say a quick prayer. And again, for everyone, it's different, but for me, it's listening to a podcast, saying a quick prayer, looking myself in the mirror and just telling myself like, hey, I've fallen away a little bit. It's time to recenter my focus. And what can I do moving forward? I can't change what I did, but what can I do moving forward to improve my relationship with Christ? And I think that like the term that I use a lot of times when talking about faith is like your faith is not a destination. It's not like you can't just get to a point in your life where I'm like, oh, I did it. Here we go. I'm done. That was great. That was fun. But now I'm done. It's a journey, and it's an everyday journey. Like there's no days off. You literally have to do it and work on it every single day. And that goes back to the consistency piece. Like the consistency in your prayer, the consistency in your faith life is what makes you holy. Consistency makes you holy. And so I think what I've really just tried to do is be as consistent as possible. If you miss step once, you get right back up. It's okay. Keep working. And I've tried to just build as consistent of a prayer life, faith life as I possibly can.
That's in many ways, it's the beauty of our Catholic faith, right? It's two things, right? Is that it empowers us to be consistent, right? Because there's a rhythm to our life, Mass on Sunday, daily prayer, the scriptures, the rosary, kind of those things that can keep us grounded. But also because Jesus loved us so much, he gives us the Eucharist, he gives us confession. We can hear the words of absolution. We can receive our Lord in the Eucharist. And kind of not to any, but going back when I was here as a student brother, and Victor's mom and sisters came for a game one weekend, and I was talking with his mom after Mass. I'm like, oh, you must be so proud of your son. Like, he's so successful. And she said, I don't care about the basketball, just as long as he gets his butt to church, right? Like, but just, staying focused and having that example in our life and being that example for other people of just simplicity and consistency of showing up and putting in, the honest work. My dad always said this to me when I was, growing up, and even as an adult, he's like, because he runs a company, right? And I think this is kind of getting on your point here. You don't have to be your best every day, but you need to give your best every day. And working on those types and keeping that mindset of, today my best isn't going to be my absolute best, but if I give my best, then the absolute best is going to be even better when I fight through those difficulties and those challenges and those things that kind of hold us back from time to time. So I just we got about 5 minutes here until 8:00, and I want to kind of respect everybody's time here. But Dave, do you have any parting words for our students here? Guys who are just serious about their faith, trying to figure out what God is trying to do in their life. If you were to imagine yourself as a 22-year-old, what words of wisdom would you give to 22-year-old Dave? And then we can end in prayer and have and go on our way.
Sure, man. Words of wisdom for 22-year-old Dave. It's an interesting question. I think someone actually asked me recently, if it was like an icebreaker question. I was on a Zoom with a bunch of other people for this award ceremony, and we were broken into a small group, and they said, all right, icebreaker question. Would you rather be able to see the future or relive part of your past and change your past? And I had no idea what I was going to say. And the guy in front of me, gets up and he's like, yeah, I wouldn't change my past, because if I went back into my past, I'd probably just make different mistakes than the ones that I made, this time. So he was like, as fun as it would be to relive my past, like I would still have the same amount of mistakes. It would just be the different ones than I made. And I remember listening to that, and I'm like, that is so smart. That is so true. And I really liked that verbiage, because, you hear so often people say like, man, I would do anything to go back to college, or if I could go back and I would change this, I would live a whole different life right now. I can't tell you the amount of people who said to me like, man, I would have loved to do what you were doing. If I just, if I could go back and tell myself as a freshman in college to study more or do this, my whole life would be different. And to me, it's like, what, you can't change that. There's nothing you can do about that. And the more time you spend on that, the more time you're just wasting your time thinking about something that you can't affect. So for me, wherever you're at this point in your life is exactly where you should be right now. Wherever you're at in your life is where God wants you to be today. Now that doesn't mean he wants you to stay there forever. He loves you too much to stay there forever. He wants you to always continue to evolve, but don't think that like right now, wherever you are, you're in the wrong spot. Trust me, you're not. You're in the right spot. So from here, don't look back at what I could have done to get in a better spot today. Look at how can I improve where I am now to get to where I want to be. And so first you have to think about where do you want to be, right? And there's a lot of different phases in your life you have to think about. Where do you want to be professionally? Where do you want to be personally? Where do you want to be with your faith life? All of those things all come into one. So I think my main advice would be, one, start to dream. Start to put together what you think your life you hopefully want to look like someday, and how can you get there? What are the steps you need to take to get there? As cliche as this sounds, like again, my biggest thing that I preach on, and the thing that I really believe, are your habits are what makes you who you are, and your consistency is what makes you great in anything. Consistency is what makes you holy. Consistency is what makes you strong in anything you do. So to me, this may sound cliche, but when I remember I had a client one time who was in a really tough spot with his team, and he just couldn't get out of a rut. He wasn't playing. He couldn't win over his coach. He was just totally in the doghouse. Everything was going wrong. And we sat down. I flew out to meet him, and we were sitting down for dinner, and we sat there for like 5 hours. I mean, they tried to kick us out of this restaurant 8 different times. And what I finally said to him at the end was, I was like, look, this sounds cliche, but try to just have a really good day tomorrow. Okay. And then the next day, do the same thing. Just try to have just all you need to don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about anything other than, what can I do today to be the best player I can be today? And then when you wake up the next day, do the same thing. And eventually, if you do that enough, you will string together a good week. If you do it enough, you'll string together a good month. And then eventually you will see the success that you want. It takes a really long time, though. I think that, like, when I look at the most successful people in either professional life, faith life, whatever it may be, it did not happen overnight. Like, these are people who worked for years and years and really their whole life to become where they are now. So my biggest advice would be, start to think of your goals, start to think of like your dream, your 1-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, your 30-year plan. Write them all down. And then every day, go back to, okay, what do I have to do today to get to where I want to be next week? What do I have to do today, just today, and just focus on that day to get to where I want to go in a month or whatever. And just try to continue to be consistent with your days. And if you miss a day, that's fine. If you have a bad day, that's fine. Expect that. Build those in. You're not going to be able to have perfect days every day, but when you write everything down, when you have real goals and you have that plan, you don't have to look at your 30-year plan every day, but base every day off of, okay, what do I have to do today to get to where I want to be eventually? And then you will start to see the results that you wanted to get, right? And so for me, what I do is, like, every night before I go to bed, I write down what I need to do then for the next day. I wake up in the morning, I shower, change, eat, whatever. I pray a little bit, and then I try to attack the day. And then at the end of the day, I look back on and say, okay, did I do everything that I was supposed to do today? Yes or no? It's usually no. And then what do I have to do tomorrow to improve on what I would have done yesterday, right? And so it's a combination to me of being consistent every day and writing out your goals so that you can have an attack of plan every single day. And if you do that, it doesn't matter if you hit bumps in the road professionally. It doesn't even matter if you totally know what you want to do. You will find success. I promise you will. And from there, then you'll be able to live the life that you were called to live.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's just take a moment to give thanks to God for this time. I just want to say, just on a personal level, thank you for joining us and being with us. It's been a tremendous blessing to watch you grow all these years, to see you kind of come into your own. I remember, I'm pretty sure it was right after you graduated from IU, we grabbed breakfast or somewhere in rural, like, it was 2014, so somewhere like outside Chicago, and just talked about life, and you were getting ready to go to LA. And it's just like, being willing to take those risks and to trust not only in yourself but in the Lord, and to know that even if, hey, what I'm going after, if I don't hit the mark, I'm going to get better and I'm going to get something out of this. And like, I think what you mentioned there, setting those goals for every day, and most of the time you're not going to hit them, but at least setting them and striving after that, and putting yourself out there and taking that risk, right? It's kind of like what separates the guy who gets the girl from the guy who doesn't. It's taking that risk and saying, hey, can I buy you a drink? Or, hey, do you want, what's your favorite color? I mean, we have to sometimes, not sometimes, but every single day, put ourselves out there and stretch ourselves to make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable. Because it's in that, so to speak, it's what's called a liminal space, in that in-between space, that we find who we truly are, because we're stepping out of our comfort zone. And so let's just take a moment to pray and to give thanks to God for our time together. So in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your time, for our time together. I thank you in a special way for blessing our community with Dave and his words of wisdom. I ask you to continue to bless him, Lord, that he might remain close to you, that he might remain your faithful disciple in all that he does, and that he might bring your love, your peace, your goodness to everyone he encounters. I ask you to bless the men who are watching tonight, that they might also be encouraged and strengthened to recognize that no matter where they end up, professionally or personally, they are called, Lord, to carry you into that breach, into that space, so that you might reign. We ask you all of this in trusting in the intercession of Mary, our mother, as we pray, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thank you guys all for joining us for Hoosier Catholic Week for Men's Night. I hope that you'll come back on Wednesday night if you're able for our keynote with Katie Prejean McGrady, or if you can join us at St. Paul's on Thursday night for praise and worship music and adoration. I'm really keyed up for praise and worship this year, even though I don't really like praise and worship that much, because the two guys, Matt Faley and Sean Hussey, who are coming to play, are both professional musicians. They're excellent. It's going to be a great night of adoration, confession, and music. Again, thank you very much, Dave, for being with us. And anytime you're at St. Paul's, anytime you're in Bloomington, make yourself at home. It's good to talk to you, and just on a personal level, to hear more of your story, and really, frankly, to be inspired by you. So thank you, and God bless you in all your endeavors, and God bless all of you who are joining us